Welcome to another episode of Killer Conversations. All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into a case that I think you'll find really fascinating.
Yeah,
And also really heartbreaking and chilling.
definitely.
We're talking about Kassanndra Cantrell. She was a 33-year-old woman from Washington State, and she was tragically murdered back in 2020. And to make the whole thing even more devastating, she was actually pregnant at the time.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
So was this a targeted attack?
Well, her ex-boyfriend, Colin Patrick Dudley, was eventually convicted of the murder.
Ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and what makes this case so fascinating and honestly so disturbing is the complex web of relationships and motives behind it.
So what do we know about this relationship between Cantrell and Dudley?
Well, it was definitely on again, off again. They'd known each other for years.
Okay.
Imagine this. They first met during a local production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, wow.
She was only 18 and he was 22 at the time.
So, I'm sure that adds another layer of complexity, right?
Yeah, I mean, in true crime, we often see these kinds of relationships where there's a history, maybe some unresolved issues, even power imbalances, and that can make understanding the motive so much more complicated. So her body was actually discovered wrapped in garbage bags and hidden in a ravine.
Oh, wow.
It's just a detail that sends chills down your spine, honestly.
So that right away tells us that there was an attempt to conceal the crime.
Right.
Which points to premeditation.
Yeah.
And that just, raises the stakes of this entire story.
And you have to wonder, if the relationship was already rocky, what happened to push things over the edge?
Right.
Especially considering Cantrell was pregnant.
Yeah, that definitely adds another layer to this.
Yeah.
What was his motive? What happened?
Right. So one of the most damning pieces of evidence was the GPS data.
Oh, okay.
Both Dudley's and Cantrell's phones were at his home the day she disappeared.
Interesting.
And this directly contradicted his initial claim that he hadn't seen her in years.
So right off the bat, he's lying to the police.
Exactly. Which in any true crime fan's book throws up a giant red flag.
Yeah, huge red flag.
It makes you question everything he says.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
That initial lie paints a very clear picture of deception.
Right.
I think is the brutality of the crime itself.
Yeah.
The fact that she was stabbed and suffered skull fractures,
It's awesome.
it really paints a very violent end to her story.
It's hard to imagine the level of rage that must have been involved. And then you add in the prosecution's claim that Dudley had a history of threatening girlfriends who became pregnant.
Really?
He allegedly said he'd sue any woman who refused an abortion and try to get full custody just to spite them.
Wow. So now, whether or not those specific claims are true,
Right.
it's chilling because it suggests a pattern of control. It's almost like the potential responsibility of fatherhood was something he was trying to avoid at all costs.
Right. And it raises the question, was this a crime fueled by a desire for control?
Yeah.
And how does Cantrell's excitement about becoming a mother play into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you have to wonder, how was she feeling? What was she thinking,
Right.
leading up to this?
Yeah. She had already envisioned this nurturing environment for her child.
It's almost unbearable to think about.
Yeah.
She's planning for this new life, and then it's all taken away.
It's just unimaginable.
Just a really, really violent end.
So sad.
So investigators, obviously, they're trying to piece together what happened, right?
Yeah.
And they start looking at people who knew her. And Colin Patrick Dudley, her ex-boyfriend, he kind of comes into focus. He's
Right.
40 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, initially he's like, I don't know what happened. I wasn't involved.
Right.
And he even downplays their relationship.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. We weren't that close, that kind of thing.
Wow. But, and this is where it gets really interesting,
Okay.
his GPS data tells a whole different story.
Oh, wow.
Like we were saying, those digital fingerprints, they're hard to erase.
You can't hide anymore.
And his data puts him right near Kassanndra when she disappeared,
Oh,
totally contradicting his whole alibi.
wow.
So faced with that, that mountain of evidence, he ends up pleading guilty.
Oh, wow.
First-degree murder,
Okay.
and he's sentenced to 320 months.
Wow.
That's 26 years.
That's a long time.
It is a long time, yeah.
But, I mean, a life was taken.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the impact on her family, especially with the plea deal.
Oh, what happened?
They felt like Dudley was able to, quote, choose his punishment, robbing them of the closure a trial might have provided.
Wow. That's gotta be really hard for them.
Yeah,
It's just a horrible situation all around.
it is.
Yeah, it really does speak to, a larger issue that we see in true crime, right? How victims of families are often left grappling with unanswered questions and a lack of closure,
Yeah,
and just a system that sometimes doesn't feel like it's on their side.
right,
It's a tragic reminder that justice isn't always black and white.
right.
But, going back to your earlier question about control, I think this case really does shine a light on a really disturbing pattern we see in so many cases.
Yeah.
Domestic violence, Dudley's alleged threats, the attempts to control the situation.
Right.
It's a chilling reminder that, these kinds of situations can escalate so quickly and with devastating consequences.
It's unsettling because for those of us, who are true crime enthusiasts, we kind of dissect these cases from afar.
Yeah.
Looking for clues, motives.
Right.
But in real life, these warning signs are often hidden in plain sight. This deep dive has been a tough one, for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear about these cases and not feel overwhelmed by the sadness and the injustice of it all.
It's definitely heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And in the world of true crime, it is easy to get desensitized to the human cost of these crimes. But that's why it's so important to remember that these are real people whose lives were cut short.
You're right. It's about honoring their memory and using their stories to spark conversations and hopefully inspire change.
And speaking of change,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that there's hope.
Yeah.
There are organizations doing incredible work on the ground,
Right.
supporting survivors, advocating for policy changes,
Yeah.
and challenging the societal norms that perpetuate violence.
That's true. We often focus on the darkness in true crime.
Yeah.
But there are people out there fighting for justice, working tirelessly to make a difference. And, we can all be a part of that change.
Absolutely. It can start with small actions like educating ourselves about the signs of domestic violence,
Right.
supporting organizations working to combat it
Yeah.
in our own circles.
It's about speaking up, challenging harmful attitudes,
Yes.
creating a culture where victims feel safe to come forward
Absolutely.
and where perpetrators are held accountable. As we wrap up this deep dive into Kassanndra Cantrell's case, it's clear that there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
But by understanding the complexities of domestic violence, recognizing the warning signs,
Right.
and supporting those who are working to combat it,
Yes.
we can move towards a future where tragedies like this are less frequent.
It's a long road, for sure. But it's a road we have to travel together. And
Right.
remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, you're not alone.
Right.
There's help available, and there's hope for a brighter future.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with another case, another story, and another opportunity to learn and grow together. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more killer conversations.